A billionaire's slap in a hospital corridor. 50 million views in 1 hour. But Madison Sterling had no idea she'd just exposed America's most dangerous serial killer. What started as viral domestic violence footage became a deadly game of psychological warfare, hidden offshore accounts, and a warehouse where 3 women had already died. Tonight, you'll discover how a pregnant woman's courage brought down a predator who'd been hunting wealthy wives for decades. This isn't just about survival. It's about the moment when the hunted becomes the hunter. Madison Sterling clutched her swollen belly as another contraction rippled through her body. 8 months pregnant and sitting alone in the marble lobby of Manhattan's most exclusive private hospital. She checked her phone for the 100th time. No messages from Blake. Her husband had promised to be here for today's appointment. Another promise broken in what was becoming an endless string of disappointments. Madison's fingers trembled as she scrolled through his social media, finding photos from Miami Beach posted just hours ago. The same Miami he'd sworn he'd never been to. Mrs. Richardson. The receptionist's voice cut through her spiral of thoughts. Dr. Vasquez will see you now. Madison stood slowly, her designer maternity dress doing little to hide her exhaustion. The other wealthy wives in the waiting room whispered behind their hands, probably wondering where her billionaire husband was. She wondered the same thing. The examination room felt cold, despite the afternoon sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a kind woman in her 50s, helped Madison onto the examination table with practiced efficiency. How are you feeling today? Madison, Dr. Vasquez asked while checking Madison's blood pressure. Tired. Blake's been traveling a lot for business. The lie came easily now, a habit formed over months of covering for her husband's increasingly frequent absences. Dr. Vasquez frowned at the blood pressure reading. 160/90. That's elevated from last week. Are you experiencing unusual stress? Madison's phone buzzed with a notification. Her heart jumped, hoping it was Blake. But instead, she found a tagged photo on Instagram. Blake Richardson, her husband of 2 years, laughing on a yacht in Miami with his arms around a stunning blonde woman. The timestamp showed it was taken yesterday. Madison, are you all right? Dr. Vasquez touched her shoulder gently. The room seemed to spin. Madison stared at the photo, recognizing the woman as Amber Collins, Blake's supposed business partner, the same woman he dismissed as just an employee whenever Madison asked about her. I need to make a phone call, Madison whispered, her voice barely audible. She stepped into the hallway and dialed Blake's number with shaking fingers. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. On the 3rd attempt, he finally answered. What is it? Madison? I'm in a meeting. His voice carried that familiar tone of irritation that had become his default when speaking to her. Blake, where are you right now? A pause. Dubai. I told you that. Some of us have to work for a living. Madison's heart pounded as she looked at the Miami photo again. Blake, I can see you on Instagram. You're in Miami with Amber. The silence stretched so long she thought he'd hung up. Then his voice returned, cold and calculating. You're being paranoid again. Madison, pregnancy hormones are making you see things that aren't there. We've discussed this with Dr. Vasquez before. No. Blake, I can see the photo. You're on a yacht with... Enough. His voice turned sharp. I don't have time for your delusions. Handle your appointment yourself. The line went dead. Madison stared at her phone, a familiar feeling of confusion washing over her. Was she being paranoid? But the photo was right there, time-stamped and geotagged. She opened Instagram and did something she'd never done before. She posted a story with a screenshot of Blake's photo, adding text that read, "Can someone explain how my husband is in Dubai and Miami at the same time asking for a pregnant friend?" The response was immediate. Comments flooded in, screenshots, shares. Within minutes, her story had been viewed thousands of times. Madison watched in real time as her perfect marriage became a viral sensation for all the wrong reasons. Her phone rang. Blake's name flashed on the screen. "What the hell did you just do?" His voice was barely controlled rage. "I posted the truth. Blake, something you seem allergic to. Delete it. Now. Do you have any idea what you've just done to my reputation?" Madison felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of her old self, the Madison who'd graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School, the Madison who'd never taken anyone's nonsense before she'd fallen under Blake Richardson's spell. "Your reputation, Blake. I'm 8 months pregnant and my husband is on vacation with another woman." "What about my reputation?" "Madison, you're being hysterical. Come home and we'll discuss this privately." "No, I'm staying here until you tell me the truth." The silence that followed felt different, dangerous. "I'll be there in an hour," Blake said finally. "And Madison, you're going to regret making our private business public." The line went dead, leaving Madison alone in the hospital corridor with the growing realization that her perfect life had been a carefully constructed lie. And now that lie was unraveling at light speed, broadcast to the world through the very technology that had exposed it. Blake Richardson arrived at Manhattan General Hospital exactly 57 minutes later, his usual calculated precision on full display. Madison watched through the lobby's glass doors as he stepped out of his black Bentley, his jaw set in the expression she'd learned to fear. Even from a distance, she could see the barely contained fury in his movements. He'd changed from the casual Miami Beach attire she'd seen in the photos into his standard Manhattan armor, a $15,000 suit that screamed success and power. But Madison was beginning to understand that Blake's entire existence was performance art, each outfit and gesture carefully chosen to project an image that might not reflect reality. The lobby fell silent as Blake entered. At 6'3", with the kind of devastating good looks that graced magazine covers, he commanded attention wherever he went. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his green eyes sharp and assessing. This was the man Madison had fallen in love with 2 years ago, the crypto billionaire who'd swept her off her feet with grand romantic gestures and promises of forever. "Madison?" His voice carried across the marble space, drawing stares from other patients and staff. "We need to talk." She remained seated, her hands protective over her belly. Something about his tone made every maternal instinct scream danger. "We can talk here. Blake, you seem to enjoy public displays lately." His perfect smile never wavered, but she caught the flash of something cold in his eyes. "Sweetheart, you're not thinking clearly. Pregnancy hormones can cause all sorts of irrational behavior. Dr. Vasquez has mentioned this before." The gasoline of his dismissal ignited the spark Madison had felt earlier. "Stop. Just stop lying to me. Blake, I saw the photos. I know you weren't in Dubai." Blake moved closer, his voice dropping to the intimate tone he'd once used to whisper sweet nothings. Now it felt like a threat. "You're embarrassing yourself, Madison. Think about who you're talking to." Dr. Vasquez appeared from the elevator, her expression concerned as she took in the tension radiating between them. "Mr. Richardson, I wasn't expecting you today." "Doctor." Blake's charm activated like a switch. "I apologize for the confusion. Madison's been experiencing some stress-related delusions. I think we need to discuss adjusting her medication." Madison felt the familiar psychological vertigo that came with Blake's gaslighting. He spoke with such authority, such concern, that for a moment she questioned her own memory of the Instagram photos. Madison hasn't mentioned any delusions to me, Dr. Vasquez said carefully. She seems quite lucid. Of course she does. Blake's laugh was perfectly calibrated to suggest fond exasperation with a difficult wife. She's very good at appearing normal when she wants to be. But the paranoid accusations, the social media outbursts. Surely you can see the concerning pattern. Madison's phone buzzed with notification after notification. Her Instagram story had exploded beyond her wildest imagination. Comments ranged from supportive to brutal, but the evidence was undeniable. Screenshots of Blake's location tags over the past week painted a clear picture of deception. Blake, Madison said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. I have a simple question. Where were you yesterday at 3 p.m.? Dubai, in meetings with potential investors. Madison held up her phone, showing the Instagram photo timestamped at exactly 3 p.m., geotagged in Miami Beach. Then explain this. For the first time since she'd known him, Blake Richardson was speechless. Madison watched emotions flicker across his face, surprise, calculation, anger, and finally something that made her blood run cold. The mask was slipping, and whatever lay underneath wasn't the man she'd married. You don't understand business, Madison, he said finally. Sometimes we have to maintain certain appearances for investors. That photo was staged for social media marketing. The explanation was so absurd that Madison almost laughed. Staged Blake, you're holding another woman on a yacht. What exactly are you marketing? I don't have to explain my business decisions to someone who's never worked a day in her life. The venom in his voice was new. Or maybe Madison was just hearing it clearly for the first time. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. Mr. Richardson, I think we should all take a step back. Madison's blood pressure was elevated today, and this kind of stress isn't good for the baby. The baby... Blake's expression softened for a moment, and Madison felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the man she'd fallen in love with was still in there somewhere. Then his hand moved faster than thought, striking her cheek with enough force to snap her head to the side. The sound echoed through the lobby like a gunshot. Time seemed to freeze. Madison touched her stinging face, feeling the heat of the handprint blooming across her skin. Around them, phones appeared in the hands of shocked onlookers. The assault had been captured from multiple angles, ensuring it would live forever in digital infamy. Don't you ever embarrass me like that again, Blake hissed, his beautiful face twisted with ugly rage. Dr. Vasquez was already moving, her medical training overriding shock. Security, I need security in the lobby now. Madison stared at her husband, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in their entire relationship. The charming billionaire was gone, replaced by someone who could strike his pregnant wife in a room full of witnesses without a second thought. Blake, she whispered, what have you done? He straightened his tie with the same casual precision he used for everything else, as if assault was just another business transaction. I've reminded you of your place, Madison. You're my wife, my property, and you'll do as you're told. Security guards appeared, their presence shifting the power dynamic immediately. Blake's expression cycled through surprise, indignation, and finally cold calculation as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. There's been a misunderstanding, he announced to the crowd, his voice carrying the authority of wealth and influence. My wife is having pregnancy-related mental health issues. I was trying to calm her down. But the phones were already uploading. The hashtags were already trending. and Madison Sterling Richardson was about to become the most famous abused wife in America, whether she wanted to be or not. The perfect storm had arrived, and there was no shelter from what was coming next. Within 30 minutes of Blake's assault, Madison Sterling Richardson became the most talked about woman in America. The hashtag #SheWearMadisonStrong trended globally as the hospital lobby footage spread across every social media platform. The image of a wealthy, powerful man striking his pregnant wife had touched a nerve that transcended all boundaries. Madison sat in Dr. Vasquez's office, pressing an ice pack to her swollen cheek while watching her life become public property in real time. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications as her private nightmare transformed into global entertainment. "The footage is everywhere," Dr. Vasquez said gently, setting down her phone after fielding calls from hospital administrators. "Are you ready to call your father?" Madison's father, Robert Sterling, was the CEO of Sterling Technologies. She'd been estranged from him since marrying Blake, a distance that had grown as Blake systematically isolated her from family and friends. Now she realized that isolation hadn't been accidental. "He won't want to hear from me," Madison said weakly. "I chose Blake over his advice." "Madison, no parent wants to be right about their child being in danger." The call connected before the second ring. "Madison, sweetheart, are you safe?" Robert Sterling's voice carried relief and barely controlled fury. "Daddy." The word came out broken, carrying 2 years of suppressed longing. "I think I made a terrible mistake." "Where are you right now?" "Manhattan, General. Blake hit me. Daddy." In front of everyone. The silence felt dangerous. When Robert spoke again, his voice carried the steel that had built a tech empire. "I'm sending a car. You're coming home. I can't just leave. Blake will. What hit you again, Madison? I've been watching his business dealings for months. There are things you need to know about your husband." Before Madison could ask what he meant, commotion erupted outside. Blake's voice demanding to see his wife, deploying his considerable charm on security staff. "He's here," Madison whispered into the phone, terror rising. "Stay where you are. Don't go anywhere with him. The car will be there in 10 minutes. Blake's voice grew louder, closer. Madison could hear him explaining that his mentally unstable wife needed his help and protection. Dr. Vasquez moved to the door, her hand on the lock. "You don't have to see him. I need to hear what he has to say. I need to understand what I married." When Blake entered, he looked like a man who'd realized the scope of his miscalculation. His perfect composure was cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. "Madison, baby, I'm so sorry." His voice carried apparent remorse, but Madison caught the calculation behind his eyes. "The stress of business, the pressure. I lost control. It'll never happen again." "What business?" Blake. Madison's question was quiet but sharp. "Because according to the internet, you don't actually have any legitimate operations. You have a crypto wallet and convincing social media." Blake's face cycled through expressions before landing on wounded innocence. "You're listening to internet conspiracy theories, Madison. You know me. Do I because the man I married wouldn't lie about where he was, wouldn't hit his pregnant wife, wouldn't have affairs with employees who may not even exist. Amber is real, and she's just business." "Stop." The word came out with surprising force. "Just stop lying to me. Blake, I know about the fake Dubai trip. I know about Miami. I know you've been transferring money out of our joint accounts." Blake's expression shifted to something Madison had never seen before. Cold, calculating, dangerous. "You've been checking our accounts. That's very concerning behavior. Combined with the paranoid delusions, The public outbursts, "I think we need professional help for you." The gaslighting was so smooth that Madison felt her reality wobble. Then her phone buzzed. "Car is outside. Come now. I'm leaving." Blake, "No, you're not." His voice carried absolute certainty. "You're my wife. You're carrying my child. You're not going anywhere." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. "Mr. Richardson, your wife is free to leave whenever she chooses." Blake's laugh was genuinely amused. "Doctor, I think you misunderstood what happened. Madison had a stress-related episode. I was trying to calm her down. She struck her face on the wall during her confusion." The audacity took Madison's breath away. She stared at her husband, finally understanding she'd never known him at all. "There's video, Blake, from multiple angles. The whole world saw you hit me." Video can be deceiving, especially when viewed by people who want to see drama. Blake's smile was confident. "My lawyers are already working on damage control. By tomorrow, this will be yesterday's news." Madison felt something crystallize inside her chest, cold clarity she hadn't experienced in months. She was looking at a predator who'd been playing a long game, and she'd been the mark from the beginning. "Goodbye, Blake. Madison, if you walk out that door, you'll regret it." She turned back to look at him one last time, memorizing the face of the man who destroyed her trust in love. "Blake, you just hit your pregnant wife in front of 50 witnesses and threatened her on camera. I think you're the one who's going to have regrets." As Madison walked toward the elevator, Blake's voice rose behind her, his usual control tactics failing. For the first time in their marriage, Blake Richardson wasn't getting his way. And Madison was about to discover that when men like Blake don't get their way, they become very dangerous indeed. Madison's childhood bedroom felt like a museum of who she used to be. Harvard diplomas, business awards, photos with friends who'd gradually disappeared after Blake's subtle campaign to isolate her. She sat on her old bed, watching her life become a global phenomenon she never wanted. The assault video had been viewed over 50 million times. Or Madison Strong trended in 17 countries. Cable news panels dissected every frame. Madison Sterling Richardson had become a symbol, whether she wanted to be or not. "The media response has been overwhelmingly supportive," her father said, settling into the chair across from her. Robert Sterling looked older than his 55 years. "Your story is resonating worldwide." "It's not a story, Dad. It's my life falling apart in high definition." Robert's phone buzzed. He frowned at the screen. "Madison, we need to talk about Blake's finances. I've had investigators looking into his dealings." Before Madison could respond, her phone rang. Blake's name appeared, and despite everything, her stomach clenched with familiar anxiety. "Don't answer," Robert said firmly. But Madison was already swiping to accept. She needed to hear his voice, to understand what came next. "Madison, thank God." Blake's voice carried relief and apparent concern. "Baby, I've been going crazy thinking about you and our child. Are you safe?" The whiplash was stunning. Gone was the cold predator from the hospital. This was the Blake who'd swept her off her feet. "I'm safe, Blake, from you." "Madison, please. There are things you don't understand. About my business. About threats I've been receiving. I've been trying to protect you." Madison felt her resolve wavering. This was Blake's greatest skill, making victims doubt their own perceptions. "What threats?" "I can't discuss it over the phone. But Madison, if you stay away from me, you're in real danger. So is our baby." Robert was shaking his head violently, but Madison found herself listening. "Meet me tonight. 1 hour to explain everything. If you still want to leave, I'll help you. I'll give you everything for the divorce. But if something happens because I couldn't warn you." The line went dead. Robert was watching her with the expression of a man who'd seen this manipulation before. "He's lying," Robert said quietly. "Everything that man has told you has been a lie." "But what if he's not?" Robert pulled out his phone, showing her documents on the screen. "Blake Richardson doesn't exist. His real name is Billy Robertson, and he's been running financial scams for over a decade." Madison felt the world tilt. "That's impossible. I've seen his business records, all fake, elaborate constructions designed to make him appear legitimate while he drains accounts of wealthy women he targets and marries." The words hit like physical blows. She thought about their joint accounts, her trust fund that Blake had convinced her to let him manage. "How much?" she whispered. Robert's expression answered before his words. "Everything, sweetheart." Madison's phone buzzed. "Madison, I'm releasing medical documentation about your mental health issues to protect our child. I'm sorry it's come to this." She stared at the message until Robert's phone started ringing. He answered and listened for 30 seconds before his face went pale. "Blake just filed for emergency guardianship," he said. "He's claiming you're mentally unstable and dangerous. He's presented medical records showing postpartum psychosis and suicidal ideation." "That's impossible. I've never been diagnosed." Madison stopped, remembering therapy sessions Blake had insisted on after her miscarriage. The kind therapist who'd asked so many questions. "He's been building a case," Robert said grimly. "Creating a paper trail to support that you're mentally incompetent. This isn't just theft. This is systematic identity erasure." Madison felt something break inside her chest, her faith in her own judgment, her ability to trust her perceptions. Blake hadn't just married her for money. He'd been planning to erase her completely. "The emergency hearing is tomorrow morning," Robert continued. "If the judge grants his petition, you'll be under Blake's guardianship. He'll control your medical decisions, your finances, your ability to see your child." Madison looked around her childhood bedroom, at awards representing the strong woman she'd been before Blake dismantled her confidence. "Dad, I think I need help, because Blake Richardson is more dangerous than we realized." Her phone rang again. Unknown number. "Mrs. Richardson. This is Detective Sarah Murphy with the NYPD. I need to speak with you about your husband. We've received disturbing information about his background." Madison looked at her father, seeing her growing fear reflected in his eyes. Whatever Blake Richardson really was, they were about to find out. And being his wife made her more than a victim. It made her a target. Detective Sarah Murphy arrived at the Sterling penthouse 40 minutes later, carrying a thick case file that she set on the dining table with significant weight. Madison had expected a typical police detective, but Murphy was younger, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that cataloged every detail. "Mrs. Richardson, I need to ask difficult questions about your husband," Detective Murphy began. "But first, you need to understand that you may be in immediate danger." Robert Sterling leaned forward. "What kind of danger?" Detective Murphy opened her file and spread photographs across the table. Madison found herself looking at pictures of 3 different women, all blonde, all beautiful, all bearing a slight resemblance to her. "These women were all married to men matching your husband's description and behavioral patterns," Murphy explained. "Different names, different identities, but the same methods." Madison picked up one photograph. "What happened to them?" Linda Martinez, married to Blake Morrison in 2018, died in apparent suicide after her husband gained financial control through mental health guardianship. Sarah Chen, married to Blake Richardson in 2020, died in a boating accident 6 months after signing power of attorney. Jessica Walsh, married to Blake Roberts last year, currently missing. The room went silent except for Madison's increasingly rapid breathing. She stared at the photographs, seeing herself in each woman's eyes. "You think Blake killed them," Roberts said quietly. "I think Blake Richardson is a serial predator who marries wealthy women, systematically isolates them, builds legal cases for their mental incompetence, and eliminates them once he has access to their money." Madison felt the baby kick strongly. "But I'm still alive." Why? Detective Murphy pulled out more documents. "Because you're worth more alive than dead. Temporarily. Your trust fund has clauses requiring your continued existence to access the principal, but those clauses expire when your child turns 1. The implication hit Madison like a physical blow. Blake wasn't just planning to steal her money and take her child. He was planning to keep her alive just long enough to access her full inheritance. "This is insane," Madison whispered. "People don't do things like this." "People like Blake Richardson absolutely do," Detective Murphy said grimly. "He's a sophisticated sociopath, highly intelligent, completely without empathy, extremely skilled at manipulation and long-term planning." Robert's phone rang. He answered with his usual sterling, but his expression quickly shifted to alarm. "That was your lawyer. Blake's emergency guardianship petition has been fast-tracked. The hearing is in 2 hours. And Madison, he's claiming you've been threatening to kill yourself and the baby?" Detective Murphy was already reaching for her phone. "That's impossible. Fast-tracking requires evidence of immediate danger." "He has recordings," Robert continued. "Audio of Madison supposedly threatening suicide. Hospital records showing severe depression and psychotic episodes. A psychiatrist willing to testify that she's having a complete mental breakdown." Madison felt reality fracturing. "Those recordings don't exist. I've never threatened suicide." "Modern technology makes creating convincing audio recordings very easy," Detective Murphy said. "If Blake has been planning this for months, he could have manufactured a complete mental health history." Madison stood abruptly, pacing to the window overlooking Central Park. Below, she could see protesters holding Madison's strong signs, hundreds of people supporting a woman they'd never met. "They have no idea," Madison said quietly. "All those people supporting me. They think this is simple domestic violence. They don't know they're watching a serial killer's final act." Detective Murphy joined her at the window. "Mrs. Richardson, in the past 6 months, has Blake given you anything to drink or eat that made you feel strange afterward? Any unexplained confusion or memory loss?" Madison turned to stare at the detective. "Why would you ask that?" "Because if Blake has been drugging you periodically, he could have recorded you during altered states, made you say things you don't remember, created evidence of mental instability while you were chemically compromised." The question unlocked suppressed memories. The chamomile tea Blake insisted on making every night. Waking up disoriented with memory gaps. Notes in her handwriting she didn't remember making. "Oh God," Madison whispered. "He's been drugging me. For months." Robert's face went white. "Madison, if he has recordings of you under the influence, then he has everything he needs to convince a judge I'm dangerously unstable," Madison finished. "And once he has guardianship..." Detective Murphy was moving toward the door. "We need to get you out of here. Now. If Blake is as sophisticated as I think, he's not waiting for a court hearing." As if summoned by her words, the building's fire alarm began blaring. Robert frowned, reaching for his phone. "Don't," Detective Murphy commanded, her hand moving to her weapon. "Mrs. Richardson, how many exits does this building have?" "2. main lobby and service entrance. And if someone wanted to force evacuation, Madison felt her blood turn to ice. They'd trigger the fire alarm. Murphy was calling for backup when the lights went out, plunging the penthouse into darkness. In the distance, Madison could hear the elevator moving, bringing someone to the top floor. Blake Richardson was coming for his wife, and Detective Murphy was about to discover that when serial killers feel cornered, they stop playing games and start killing people. The elevator dinged softly in the darkness, its cheerful sound grotesquely inappropriate for the terror filling the penthouse. Detective Murphy had her weapon drawn, positioning herself between Madison and the hallway. Robert Sterling moved to his daughter's side, his face grim in the emergency lighting. "Stay behind me," Murphy whispered, "no matter what happens." The footsteps in the hallway were unhurried, confident. Madison could hear Blake's voice, casual and conversational, as if arriving for dinner rather than whatever this actually was. "Madison, sweetheart, I know you're scared, but I'm here to help. We need to discuss what's best for you and our baby." Detective Murphy motioned for silence. Speaking into her radio in code, Madison didn't understand. Where was backup? Blake appeared at the living room's edge, no longer bothering with his charming mask. He looked like what he truly was, a predator interrupted during a hunt. But he wasn't alone. Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped out from behind him, her kind face apologetic but resolute. "Madison, honey, I'm here to help. You've been having a severe mental health crisis, and Blake is very worried." The betrayal hit Madison like a physical blow. Dr. Vasquez, who delivered her baby, supported her through the hospital assault, seemed to genuinely care. Dr. Madison's voice came out broken. "Madison, your recent behavior has been very concerning," Dr. Vasquez continued, her medical authority lending weight to every word. "The paranoid delusions, public outbursts, obsessing over Blake's normal business activities. You need immediate psychiatric intervention." Detective Murphy kept her weapon trained on Blake, but uncertainty crept into her expression. Dr. Vasquez was a respected physician, her word carrying significant credibility. "Detective Murphy," Blake said pleasantly, "I appreciate your concern, but this is a family matter. My wife is having a severe mental health episode, and her doctor agrees she needs immediate treatment." "Stay where you are," Murphy commanded, but her voice lacked earlier certainty. Blake smiled, pulling out his phone and playing an audio recording. Madison's own voice filled the room, slurred and strange. "I can't do this anymore. Blake, I can't live like this. Maybe the baby and I would be better off dead." Madison stared in horror. She had no memory of saying those words, but the voice was unmistakably hers. "I recorded this last week," Blake explained to Detective Murphy. "Madison has been having increasingly severe episodes of depression and suicidal ideation. Dr. Vasquez has been treating her, but her condition is deteriorating rapidly." "That's not real," Madison said desperately. "I never said that. He drugged me." "Madison, sweetie," Dr. Vasquez interrupted gently. "Paranoid accusations are part of your condition. Blake has been nothing but supportive throughout your struggles." Detective Murphy lowered her weapon slightly. "Mrs. Richardson, do you remember making that recording?" Madison felt her reality crumbling. These were exactly the memory gaps she'd been experiencing, periods of confusion she'd attributed to pregnancy hormones. "I don't remember," she whispered, the admission feeling like defeat. Blake stepped forward, radiating concern and compassion. "Madison, I know you're scared. Mental illness is frightening when you can't trust your own perceptions. But I'm here to take care of you." "The other women," Madison said suddenly. What about Linda Martinez, Sarah Chen, Jessica Walsh? Blake's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Detective, I have no idea what my wife is talking about. Paranoid delusions often involve elaborate conspiracy theories. Detective Murphy studied Blake carefully, her training warring with the evidence before her. Here was a concerned husband with medical support trying to help his mentally ill wife. Mrs. Richardson, Murphy said carefully, do you have any actual evidence that your husband has harmed anyone? Madison looked around desperately. Her father's face showed confusion and growing doubt. Dr. Vasquez looked genuinely concerned for her mental state. Detective Murphy was questioning her own assessment, and Blake looked like the perfect husband dealing with his wife's tragic breakdown. The Instagram photos, Madison said weakly. He lied about Dubai. Madison, Blake said sadly, we've discussed this. Those photos were for social media marketing. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward with apparent medical concern. Detective Murphy, I really think Madison needs immediate psychiatric evaluation. Her condition is deteriorating rapidly, and she could be dangerous to herself or her unborn child. Madison felt the trap closing with suffocating precision. Blake had spent months creating this moment. Every piece of evidence, every witness, every authority figure aligned to support his narrative. The emergency guardianship hearing, Robert Sterling said suddenly. Blake, if you're so concerned, why the rush for legal control? Blake's expression remained composed, but Madison caught irritation in his eyes at the unexpected question. Mr. Sterling, Madison needs professional care that requires legal authority to provide. As her husband, I'm the appropriate person to make medical decisions if she's not competent. Detective Murphy holstered her weapon, the decision written on her face. Mrs. Richardson, I think you should go with your husband and doctor. Get the help you need. Madison felt her last hope crumbling. Even the detective who'd seemed to understand was now part of Blake's narrative. Please, Madison whispered, looking directly at Murphy. Please investigate the other women. Don't let him, Madison, Blake said gently, moving toward her with outstretched arms. It's time to go home. Time to get better. As her husband approached, Madison realized with crystal clarity that she was about to disappear forever. Not immediately, but gradually, systematically, until Blake Richardson had everything he wanted and Madison Sterling no longer existed. The perfect crime, executed with medical and legal authority, in full view of everyone who should have protected her, unless she could find a way to save herself in the next 60 seconds. Madison found herself in Blake's Bentley 30 minutes later, Dr. Vasquez beside her with the calm authority of medical intervention. Detective Murphy followed in her own car, a small comfort Madison clung to as they drove through Manhattan toward what Blake claimed was a private psychiatric facility. The facility was a converted warehouse in Queens, isolated and surrounded by chain-link fencing. Madison's maternal instincts screamed danger as they pulled through gates that closed automatically behind them. This doesn't look like a hospital, Madison said, her voice steady despite rising terror. It's a specialized treatment center, Dr. Vasquez explained smoothly. Very private, very discreet, perfect for someone in your position. Blake parked near a loading dock rather than any visible entrance. Detective Murphy pulled up beside them, exiting her car with obvious suspicion. Mr. Richardson, Murphy called out, this doesn't look like any medical facility I've seen. Blake's smile never wavered. Detective, this is a highly specialized private clinic treating patients who require absolute discretion. Dr. Vasquez was already opening Madison's door. Madison, let's get you inside where you can rest while we assess your condition. Madison stepped out slowly, her pregnant belly making movement awkward. She noted the lack of medical signage, emergency vehicles, or any indicators this was a legitimate facility. "Where's the staff?" she asked. "Waiting inside," Blake replied, moving to her side. Detective Murphy studied the building with growing unease. "Mr. Richardson, I'd like to see facility identification. Verification this is licensed." Blake's expression flickered with annoyance before the concerned husband mask returned. "Of course, Detective. Once we're inside." As they approached what appeared to be a service entrance, Madison noticed fresh tire tracks and what looked like recent disturbance where something heavy had been dragged. The door opened before they reached it, revealing a man in scrubs who looked more like security than medical staff. His smile was professional, but his eyes were cold. "Mrs. Richardson," he said warmly. "I'm David, part of your care team. Dr. Vasquez has briefed us on your condition." They entered what should have been a reception area but looked like an empty office with minimal furniture and no visible medical equipment. Madison's nursing background recognized immediately that nothing suggested legitimate medical care. "Where's the nursing station patient rooms?" "Upstairs," David replied smoothly. "This is just intake." Blake guided her toward an elevator, his touch now feeling possessive and threatening. The elevator had been modified with what looked like restraint points built into the walls. "I'm not getting in there," Madison said firmly. Stepping back, Dr. Vasquez moved closer, her voice taking on the authoritative tone Madison remembered from emergencies. "Madison, you're having an anxiety attack. This irrational fear indicates how much you need treatment." Detective Murphy was studying the elevator with obvious suspicion. "Mr. Richardson, that elevator has been modified. Those look like restraint points." Blake's composure cracked slightly. "Detective, this facility treats patients with severe conditions. Safety modifications are standard. For pregnant women having mental health episodes," before anyone could respond, the lights went out, plunging the space into darkness. In the chaos, Madison heard a weapon being drawn, voices shouting contradictory commands, and rapid footsteps across concrete. When emergency lighting kicked in 30 seconds later, Detective Murphy was unconscious on the ground. David stood over her with a taser, while Blake and Dr. Vasquez flanked Madison. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Blake said, his voice completely different now, cold, efficient, devoid of pretense. But Detective Murphy was becoming problematic. Madison stared at the unconscious detective, understanding that this had been planned in extensive detail. "You're going to kill her." "Eventually," Blake replied matter-of-factly. "But first, we need to complete your treatment. You're going to have a tragic psychiatric break tonight. You're going to harm yourself and your baby in postpartum psychosis. Sad, but not uncommon." Dr. Vasquez was preparing a syringe with practiced efficiency. "The beauty is that it's completely believable. Your social media breakdown, the public assault, paranoid accusations, it all supports a woman spiraling into dangerous mental illness." Madison looked around the empty space. Understanding this wasn't a medical facility at all. It was a killing floor, designed for her murder and probably his previous wives. "How many women have you brought here?" Blake checked his watch with casual precision. "You'll be the fourth. Dr. Vasquez has been very helpful in establishing medical credibility for each case." "They trusted you too," Madison said, looking at Dr. Vasquez with horror and betrayal. "They all needed help, Madison, just like you do." Dr. Vasquez's voice carried genuine conviction, as if she truly believed she was providing medical care rather than participating in serial murder. Madison felt her baby kick strongly, reminding her what was at stake, not just her life, but her unborn daughter's. "Blake, Madison said quietly. Before you kill me, I need to know something. Did you ever love me, even a little? Blake's laugh was genuinely amused. Madison, love is a weakness successful people can't afford. You were an investment opportunity that paid very well for 2 years. Nothing more. The casual cruelty triggered something deep in Madison's chest, not despair, but fury, pure, protective, maternal rage at the man who'd stolen 2 years of her life and was now planning to steal everything else. Madison Sterling Richardson was about to die in a warehouse in Queens, murdered by the man she'd trusted with her heart, unless she could find a way to survive the next hour. And Madison was discovering that when a woman has nothing left to lose, she becomes very dangerous indeed. Madison Sterling Richardson had spent 2 years learning to doubt her instincts, to second-guess her perceptions, to make herself smaller under Blake's manipulation. But facing her own murder and that of her unborn child stripped away every learned behavior and revealed the Harvard Business School graduate who'd once commanded boardrooms. Dr. Vasquez, Madison said calmly, before you inject me, I'm curious about your medical license. Participating in the murder of pregnant women seems like it might violate your Hippocratic oath. Dr. Vasquez paused, the syringe halfway to Madison's arm. Madison, you're having a psychotic break. I'm providing medical intervention to prevent you from harming yourself and your baby. Interesting intervention, Madison observed, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. Tell me, when Linda Martinez supposedly committed suicide, did you provide the same intervention? How about Sarah Chen's boating accident? Blake's expression shifted from confidence to annoyance. Madison, you're stalling. Dr. Vasquez, proceed. But Madison had found her leverage in the doctor's hesitation. Dr. Vasquez, you know I'm right. You know this isn't medical treatment. What did he threaten you with? What's he holding over you that makes participating in murder seem better? You don't understand the situation, Dr. Vasquez said, her hand trembling slightly. Then explain it. Because from where I'm standing, you're about to murder a pregnant woman for a psychopath who's been lying about everything for years. Blake moved closer, his patience exhausted. Enough, Elena. Inject her now. Elena, Madison repeated, using the doctor's first name deliberately. Elena, you delivered my baby during my miscarriage 2 years ago. You held my hand while I grieved. Look at me and tell me that woman deserves to die. Dr. Vasquez looked directly into Madison's eyes for the first time since entering the warehouse. Madison saw something crack in the doctor's composure, a flicker of the compassionate physician she'd once believed her to be. Blake, Dr. Vasquez said quietly. Maybe we should reconsider. Blake moved faster than thought, grabbing the syringe and plunging it into Dr. Vasquez's neck instead. The doctor collapsed immediately, hitting the concrete with sickening force. Blake, Madison screamed, the sound echoing through the empty space. Elena was becoming unreliable, Blake explained matter-of-factly, stepping over the unconscious doctor. Fortunately, I don't need medical supervision to complete your treatment. Madison backed toward the wall, her mind racing through limited options. Blake was between her and the exit. Detective Murphy and Dr. Vasquez were unconscious but breathing. Blake, my father knows where I am. When I don't come home. Your father believes you're receiving psychiatric treatment. When your body is found tomorrow, it will be consistent with tragic suicide during mental health crisis. Sad. But these things happen. Blake pulled out his phone and began recording. Madison, I need you to say some things for the camera. Think of it as your final performance. Go to hell. Blake's laugh was genuinely amused. Madison, you're going to say exactly what I tell you, because if you don't, I'm going to inject Detective Murphy with enough drugs to stop her heart. Then Dr. Vasquez, your cooperation can save their lives. Madison looked at the two unconscious women, understanding that Blake had just given her the only leverage she had. What do you want me to say? Confess to having an affair. Express guilt about betraying our marriage. Talk about how the pressure of being caught has driven you to thoughts of suicide. But I never had an affair. The beauty of video confession is that it doesn't matter what actually happened. It only matters what people believe happened. Madison stared at her husband, finally understanding the full scope of his manipulation. He wasn't just killing her, he was destroying her reputation posthumously. Start recording, Madison said quietly. Blake smiled and held up his phone. Whenever you're ready, sweetheart. Madison looked directly into the camera, her voice steady and clear. My name is Madison Sterling Richardson. If you're watching this video, I'm probably dead. The man recording this is Blake Richardson, and he's a serial killer who marries wealthy women, systematically drains their finances, and then murders them. Blake's expression shifted from confidence to rage in a split second. Stop recording, he commanded, but Madison continued. Blake Richardson killed Linda Martinez in 2018. He killed Sarah Chen in 2020. Jessica Walsh is probably dead too. He's been planning my murder for months, creating fake medical records and building a case for my mental incompetence. Blake lunged forward to stop the recording, but Madison had anticipated his movement. She threw herself sideways, her pregnant belly making the maneuver awkward but effective enough to avoid his grasp. The phone clattered across the concrete floor, still recording as Madison and Blake struggled. Despite her pregnancy, Madison fought with the desperation of a woman protecting her child. She clawed at Blake's face, drawing blood, and managed to knee him hard enough to double him over. Help! Madison screamed as loudly as she could. Someone help me. Blake recovered quickly, his superior strength overwhelming Madison's determination. He pinned her against the wall, his hands around her throat, his face twisted with rage. You stupid bitch, he hissed. You've ruined everything. Madison felt consciousness fading as Blake's grip tightened. Her last coherent thought was that her baby would die with her. Another victim of a monster who saw women as financial opportunities. Then the warehouse doors exploded inward, and Madison heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her father's voice shouting her name, followed by what sounded like an army of law enforcement officers flooding into the space. Blake's hands released her throat as he spun toward the commotion, his face cycling through surprise, calculation, and finally desperate fury as he realized his perfect crime had become a very public failure. Madison slumped against the wall, gasping for air and feeling her baby kick strongly in response to her elevated heart rate. She was alive. Her daughter was alive. And Blake Richardson's reign of terror was finally over. The warehouse transformed into a crime scene within minutes as FBI agents, NYPD officers, and paramedics swarmed the space. Madison found herself sitting on a gurney while an EMT checked her vital signs and monitored the baby's heartbeat, the steady rhythm providing reassurance that her daughter had survived the night's trauma. Robert Sterling stood beside the gurney, his face pale with the aftermath of fear and fury. Madison, how did you know to confess on camera like that? Business school, Madison replied weakly, managing a small smile. Crisis Management 101. If you can't control the narrative, disrupt it completely. Across the warehouse, Madison could see Blake Richardson in handcuffs, his perfect composure finally and completely shattered. He was screaming about his rights, about false accusations, about the elaborate conspiracy against him. The charming billionaire mask had been permanently destroyed, revealing the predator underneath. Detective Murphy approached the gurney, a bandage on her head but otherwise alert. "Mrs. Richardson, I owe you an apology." Blake's manipulation was so sophisticated that even law enforcement training couldn't penetrate it initially. "How did you find us?" Madison asked. "Your father never trusted the psychiatric facility story." Murphy explained. "When we couldn't verify the facility's license or accreditation, he insisted on conducting surveillance. The FBI had already been investigating Blake under his various identities." Robert squeezed Madison's hand gently. "When Detective Murphy didn't check in at the scheduled time, we knew something had gone wrong. The tactical team was already in position." Madison watched as FBI agents photographed Blake's phone, which had continued recording throughout the struggle. Her unplanned confession video had captured not just Blake's identity as a serial killer, but the attempted murder itself. "The video evidence is comprehensive," Detective Murphy continued. "Blake's confession, the attempted murder, everything. Combined with the evidence we've gathered about his previous victims, he'll never see freedom again." Dr. Vasquez was being loaded onto a separate gurney, conscious but groggy from whatever Blake had injected her with. She looked at Madison with an expression of profound shame and confusion. "Doctor," Madison called out as the gurney passed, "what did he have on you?" "Doctor," Vasquez stopped the paramedics with a weak gesture. "My daughter," she whispered. "Blake said he would kill my daughter if I didn't help him. I thought I was protecting her." Madison felt a stab of understanding for the doctor's impossible position. Blake's manipulation extended far beyond his wives. He'd created a network of complicit victims who believed they had no choice but to participate in his crimes. "Where is your daughter now?" "Safe," Detective Murphy interjected. "We found her this afternoon. She was never actually in danger." But Blake had convinced Dr. Vasquez otherwise through elaborate fake evidence. As the paramedics prepared to transport Madison to a real hospital for observation, FBI agent Jennifer Walsh approached the gurney. Madison recognized the name immediately from Detective Murphy's files. "Agent Walsh, are you related to Jessica Walsh?" The agent's expression was grim but satisfied. "Jessica was my sister. We've been tracking Blake Richardson for 8 months, trying to build a case strong enough to ensure he could never hurt another woman. I'm so sorry about Jessica." "Jessica would be proud of what you did tonight," Agent Walsh replied. "Your video confession and survival have given us everything we need to close cases in 4 states and potentially save dozens of future victims." Madison felt the weight of that responsibility settling on her shoulders. She'd become more than just a survivor. She'd become the key witness in one of the most significant serial killer cases in recent history. "What happens now? Now you heal," Robert said firmly. "You focus on having a healthy baby and building a life free from Blake's influence." And Blake, Agent Walsh's smile was cold but satisfied. "Blake Richardson is facing federal charges for murder, attempted murder, fraud, and racketeering across multiple states. He'll be lucky if he avoids the death penalty." As the ambulance doors closed and Madison was transported toward Manhattan General Hospital, she allowed herself to feel something she hadn't experienced in months: hope, not just for survival, but for a future where her daughter would grow up safe from the kind of predator who had nearly destroyed them both. The viral hashtag #IsMadisonStrong had taken on new meaning. Madison Sterling Richardson wasn't just a victim who'd found her voice. She was a woman who'd saved herself and potentially countless others through courage, intelligence, and the refusal to accept defeat. Outside the ambulance windows, Madison could see the lights of Manhattan growing closer. Home, safety, a future where love didn't hit, didn't lie, and didn't kill. Blake Richardson's empire of deception had crumbled in a single night, destroyed by the strength of the woman he'd tried to erase. The billionaire who'd slapped his pregnant wife in a hospital had indeed been destroyed, not by her CEO father, but by Madison herself, who discovered that sometimes the strongest women are those who refuse to stay victims. 3 months after the warehouse confrontation, Madison Sterling sat in her new apartment's nursery, holding 3-week-old Emma Margaret Richardson Sterling. The baby was healthy, beautiful, and completely unaware of the dramatic circumstances that had preceded her birth. The apartment was smaller than the penthouse she'd shared with Blake, but it felt infinitely larger because it was filled with genuine safety rather than performed luxury. Sunlight streamed through windows onto furniture that belonged to her, in a space where she could breathe freely. Madison's phone buzzed with notifications she'd learned to ignore. Trial coverage, book deals, movie offers, all the ways the world wanted to commodify her trauma. She'd declined most, choosing instead to focus on healing and raising her daughter. "How are my girls today?" Robert Sterling asked, entering with coffee and bagels Madison had craved throughout pregnancy. "We're good, Dad. Really good." Madison shifted Emma to her shoulder, marveling at how perfectly her daughter fit. "Any news from the trial?" Robert's expression grew satisfied. "Blake was convicted on all counts yesterday. Life without parole, consecutive sentences. He'll never hurt another woman." Madison nodded, feeling unexpected closure. Justice hadn't erased the trauma, but it confirmed her perceptions had been accurate, her fears justified, and her decision to fight back had been right. "Dr. Vasquez sent another letter," Robert continued. "She's been accepted into a victim services program and is testifying in cases involving medical professionals coerced into criminal activity." Madison had forgiven Dr. Vasquez months ago, understanding that Blake's manipulation extended beyond romantic relationships. The doctor's participation had been coerced through threats against her family. "What about Detective Murphy? Promoted to head the new domestic violence task force, your case has become a training example for recognizing sophisticated psychological manipulation in law enforcement." Madison smiled, glad something positive had emerged. The viral nature of her story had sparked conversations about financial abuse, psychological manipulation, and how wealthy predators could exploit legal and medical systems. Emma stirred, making soft sounds that filled Madison with wonder. This tiny person had survived everything Blake had put them through, arriving healthy despite the trauma. "Have you decided about the foundation?" Robert asked gently. Madison had been offered the opportunity to head a new organization focused on helping women escape financial abuse. The Madison Sterling Foundation would provide legal aid, financial planning, and psychological support. "I think so," Madison replied, looking at Emma's peaceful face. "But not for a few months. I want to be present for her first months, to give her the stability I didn't have during pregnancy. Your mother would be proud of both decisions." Madison felt the familiar pang of loss for her mother, who died before Emma's birth but whose wisdom had guided Madison through the darkest moments. The nursery contained several photos of Margaret Sterling, ensuring Emma would know about the grandmother who'd believed in strong women changing the world. A knock interrupted their conversation. Robert answered, returning with a nervous young woman in her 20s. "Mrs. Richardson Sterling." "My name is Amanda Peterson. I saw your story on the news, and I think my husband might be like Blake." Madison's heart clenched with recognition and purpose. This was why she'd survived, why she'd fought back, why she'd refused to let Blake's narrative define her story, not just for herself and Emma, but for all the women still trapped in situations they didn't recognize as dangerous. "Please, sit down," Madison said gently, settling on the couch with Emma. "Tell me what's been happening." As Amanda described a pattern Madison recognized immediately: isolation, financial control, gradual erosion of confidence disguised as love. Madison felt the familiar surge of protective anger that had fueled her survival. Emma gurgled softly, as if sensing the moment's importance. This baby would grow up in a world where her mother had spoken truth to power, where love was defined by respect and safety rather than control and manipulation. "Amanda," Madison said when the young woman finished, "you're not crazy, you're not paranoid, and you're not alone. What you're describing is abuse, and there are people who can help." Robert was already reaching for his phone, preparing to connect Amanda with the resource network Madison had helped develop. The infrastructure for escape, for justice, for healing. Outside the apartment windows, Manhattan hummed with 8 million stories of struggle and triumph. In one small apartment overlooking Central Park, a mother and daughter were writing a new chapter, one defined by survival, strength, and the choice to help others find their way home. The billionaire who'd slapped his pregnant wife had been destroyed, not by her CEO father's corporate power, but by something far more powerful: a woman who'd remembered her worth, fought for her freedom, and refused to let fear silence her voice. Madison Sterling had learned that love doesn't hit, doesn't steal, doesn't lie, and doesn't diminish. And she was going to spend the rest of her life making sure other women learned that truth too, before it was too late. Emma Margaret Richardson Sterling fell asleep in her mother's arms, safe in the knowledge that she was loved without conditions, protected without control, and destined to grow up in a world where her mother had made it safer for women to trust their own hearts. The perfect storm had passed, leaving behind clear skies and the promise of better days ahead. Madison's strength saved not just her own life, but countless future victims. Her story proves that sometimes the most powerful weapon against evil is simply refusing to stay silent. If this story moved you, hit that like button to support survivors everywhere. Share this with someone who needs to hear Madison's message of hope. And subscribe for more incredible true stories of courage that will restore your faith in the human spirit. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need them most. Thank you for listening. And remember, you're stronger than you know.